Hello, and welcome back to Thinkology. My name is Robin, and today we're going to be talking about McKamey Manor, the haunted house that actually tortures you. These survival horror events can get pretty grisly, so I'm going to issue a content warning here and now that if gore, abuse, and mentions of literal torture are upsetting for you, this may be a good topic to turn away from, and we will see you next time. For those of you sticking around, let's get right into it. Alright, McKamey Manor was created by Russ McKamey in San Diego and began touring back in 2014. They also launched 2 locations in Summertown, Tennessee, and Huntsville, Alabama in later years, respectively. Russ claims to have a military background of 23 years and, although you'd think that this may have been created as a way to earn money, this isn't your standard haunted house. Instead, McKamey Manor runs on donation alone. You can get in with just a bag of dog food, as McKamey has 5 dogs for you to feed. One source even claims that if you make it through, you will be paid $20,000, but as of writing this, no one has. Aside from payment though, you also need a few other things to get into McKamey Manor. Let's take a look at that requirement list. You have to be 21 years old or 18 to 20 with parents' approval. You have to complete a sports physical and a doctor's letter stating that you're physically and mentally cleared, and you have to pass a background check and be screened via Facebook, FaceTime, or a phone. You also have to provide proof of medical insurance and pass a portable drug test the day of the show. You also have to sign a detailed 40-page waiver and then watch a 2-hour video about the manor. Every person who fails to complete the manor must utter their safe word and the phrase, "You really don't want to do this." The thing is, given all of these warnings and waivers and safe words, I'm inclined to blame both parties here for basically condoning torture. Even if McKamey is far more responsible for creating these little torture houses, it's disturbing that McKamey had the support, let alone why he decided to make this manor in the first place. Yet somehow, McKamey had massive support. In a 2015 interview on The Guardian, he states that they had over 27,000 people on the waitlist to get in. A comment on one of his videos states that he's just asking for people to die on a tour, saying that a waiver won't mean anything if a person dies. This commenter isn't entirely wrong. McKamey admits that they did have one heart attack before, yet he seems strangely proud as he says it, and even adds, "It was good stuff" afterwards.
7 years ago we had a heart attack. That was good stuff.
Perhaps if it weren't for the financial incentive, people may have quit much sooner. Yet, with this incentive in place, desperate people may be subjecting themselves to this brutality, and one could argue that McKamey is just taking advantage of said desperation for his own kicks. Some sources, like the Nashville Scene, claim that there is no prize money, but enough have mentioned it in my research that I think many who attend may be convinced that if they make it through, they will be rewarded. More on this later though. The Guardian also wrote, "The half-dozen kidnappers are volunteer actors who originally came here as guests and now return to pass on that suffering with glee to others." A writer on The Truth About McKamey Manor, one of the several Facebook groups which monitor and criticize the haunt, accused it of recklessly endangering people by not properly training them. The possible consequences, such as dry drowning or possible damage to the lungs, were never explained. If actors weren't aware of these consequences and possible life-threatening situations, it's fair to say that they had no idea what they were doing. The actors were never told what to do in certain situations. For example, how to properly approach someone who is having a panic attack or loses consciousness, one wrote. Punishment escalates if you swear, because McKamey, of all people, has a puritanical streak. He says he does not smoke, drink alcohol or coffee, or cuss. There's no nudity or sexual suggestion in the manor. This is a live theatrical performance, says McKamey, who majored in theater studies before joining the Navy. It's not real. If people were really hurt, we'd be shut down. It's smoke and mirrors. Well, he certainly wants people to believe otherwise, doesn't he? McKamey has been called a psychopath all the same, but he shrugs off his critics as haters. It's just a challenge, something that people want to be the first to conquer, according to the participants. It's done to test people's limits, and considering that people do continue to return and claim that they have no regrets about it, then how can it really be that horrible, right? Some argue that if these people are willing, then they should be actually free to do as they like, right? Maybe there's truth to that, but people are being tortured. Is that ever actually okay? Now, I wanted to get a bit deeper into what this manor truly is, so I watched parts of the 2-hour video that McKamey posted to his YouTube channel to see if that would reveal anything else about why the hell this was made in the first place and what McKamey warns people they're up against. Alright, in his movie, he says that everyone believes they are different. Everyone believes that they can be the one to beat the manor and win the $20,000. Most of this video is simply him explaining how people underestimate the manor in an unscripted stream of consciousness as he walks around his property. For one portion, McKamey makes mention of his new event, Desolation, and describes it as mental torture as opposed to physical. Just under 10 minutes in, McKamey states that if you want to get thrown around or beaten up as the previous events featured, that won't happen in Desolation. Desolation is solely about the fear of abandonment. Apparently, that's why he's also lowered the age of entry to 18 to 20 with parental consent. In previous events, you had to be 21. Personally, I think that torture, whether mental or physical, can be extremely traumatizing, so I don't think that it's a justifiable reason to lower the age limit, but that's only my opinion. McKamey also says that he legally needs anyone entering the movie to watch the movie Desolation, about the event with the same name. This movie wasn't on his YouTube channel, there is no link, but I was able to find more footage of the manor and more detail about what the hell happens in this place. In the trailer for the 2019 Desolation event, there are people covered in what looks like mud and gore, clearly in distress. One guest has a massive blade placed very close to their face. There's guests that are being choked, buried, and drowned. Though it's a bit hard to tell what's happening as the footage is red and black and not very well lit. There's still more than enough to see that these guests are being tortured. This is not a haunted house, and as much as I agree that these guests have been warned, it's disturbing that this place exists in the first place. This truly looks like graphic, homemade horror movie footage, and I do not recommend anyone watch it. My first thought after seeing it was not understanding how this was possibly legal, though we're gonna get to that in just a moment. As for these events, some may refer to the manor as an extreme BDSM experience, but those that are actually experienced in BDSM explain that communication is extremely important, that nothing is done without explicit, clear consent and awareness at all times. Even if guests may sign a waiver at McKamey Manor, it's not as if they know every single thing they're consenting to in advance, do they? Correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem that way. Not to mention, safe words are crucial in BDSM, whereas some articles argue that there actually are no safe words at the manor, as evidenced by 2 volunteer/former guests stating that they were actually screaming the word safe word during their visit.
Yeah, they didn't let us stop. There's no safe word. I was yelling, literally yelling safe word.
They were not
Yeah,
stopping.
they didn't care.
One article writes that some experiences will include everything from being forced to eat cockroaches, human hair, tied to a gurney as a spider crawls over their face, and having their heads dunked into a dirty toilet bowl. Only slightly nasty, reminiscent of my high school days. During pre-interviews on Skype, Russ begs prospective guests to reconsider the torture that they are about to put themselves through. while surreptitiously using that time to make note of any potential fears he picks up on you. If he finds out that someone is claustrophobic, for example, he's going to make sure they can hardly move. Russ calls this the discovery phase of building a guest's personal horror movie, tailoring the nightmare to fit their character. Like a team of private detectives, Russ and his volunteers comb the internet searching for any trail of personal information that might tip them off to fears and insecurities. My job is to have them confide in me and trust me, he says. I'll be the guy talking nice and calm with them. But I'm instigating everything too. Other sources recount similar actions such as being buried in mud, having your eyes covered with duct tape, being hypnotized, dealing with fires, heights, and other live critters. Their waiver warned participants that they can be fish hooked, have plastic bags wrapped around their faces, have their teeth extracted without Novocaine, and even have their fingernails removed. Laura Hertz Brotherton, who participated at one of the Manor's events in 2016, stated, and I quote, "I was waterboarded, I was tased, I was whipped, I still have scars of everything they did to me. I was repeatedly hit in my face over and over and over again, like open-handed, as hard as a man could hit a woman in the face. The dirt started to go into my throat and I started to swallow it. I'm coughing and I keep saying, I need water, and they would just splash water on my face. They wouldn't actually give me water. That went on for, I want to say 20 to 30 minutes. Before she left, she said that Russ made her take a video saying how great her experience was and that she was basically silenced by the waiver she had signed earlier, end quote. Now, this last sentence is what truly terrifies me. Laura was portrayed as a willing participant when she was traumatized, potentially luring others in for McKamey's sick and twisted fantasies. It's upsetting to hear that McKamey will supposedly warn people with these disclaimers and warnings, yet misrepresent the experience that guests actually have. If you do want to hear other guests' experiences, there is one source called Hidden San Diego that goes into yet even more detail. But I think that you've probably heard enough by now, so we're gonna move on. Here's the thing. With so much torment going on here, does the waiver actually cover it? Let's say someone did die in one of these events, or suffer long-lasting, permanent injury, which seems like only a matter of time, honestly. Would Russ be liable? That's what I really wanted to uncover next. After all, it's one thing to need a waiver for something like skydiving, where there is a risk involved. But there's another thing to have a waiver for literal abuse. Even if the waiver process for their events like Descent take 2 hours, that would hardly matter if it's illegal, right? Again, all I could wonder after seeing some of the nightmare-inducing footage from this place is how McKamey has not been arrested yet. I tried to look into the waiver and see how genuinely it could protect Russ from the police, and some sources claim that it truly is this waiver. Tennessee District Attorney General Brent A. Cooper said this in a statement. It's legal because basically the people that are subjecting themselves to the McKamey program, or whatever you want to call it, they're doing so voluntarily. Yep, the waiver is legal. The 40-page waiver makes everything completely legal. After all, McKamey is not a business. The torturers are volunteers. He just asks for a bag of dog food as admission, and it's set up on his own property. Technically speaking, he can do what he wants. There's only one real way that Russ would be in trouble: if a guest withdraws consent. The district attorney also explained that. Tennessee is a state where you can withdraw consent at any time. Even though someone may sign a really long consent form if they ever indicate that they're withdrawing consent, McKamey should probably take that seriously, because if that person really has withdrawn consent and you continue to confine the person against their will, then you're actually committing a crime. This is where Russ may or may not be breaking the law. I doubt that he would upload footage of a guest stating, "I withdraw my consent" to the YouTube channel, but I wonder if this safe word phrase that some sites claim he was implementing so that no one could accuse him of breaking these specific consent laws. There are those that desperately want state officials to act, understandably so, and petitions have been launched to shut it down, with tens of thousands of signatures being gathered. Some sources reiterate that safe words have been ignored and his employees are not trained whatsoever. And one petition even claims that the employees are known to be aggressive, with some having histories of assault. Police are plenty aware of his actions. Hell, Russ has to call authorities every single day that he does one of these tours to let them know that any screams or calls for help around his property are false alarms. Can you imagine living near this guy and having to hear people screaming and begging for their lives as they're tortured whenever Russ is holding an event? That's just freaking horrifying! Now, others claim that the fact that Russ is no longer releasing full videos of these events is also distressing, as there's no way to verify that safe words were ignored, and participants, given what they've been through, might not even remember if they gave a safe word or withdrew consent. In one petition, a man named Liam Denver claimed he refuses to release full videos to the public as well as the participants, and admits to giving massively toned-down sissy tours to bloggers and reporters. Whether or not McKamey has managed to avoid the law, no one wants him around. I can't blame them at all. I wouldn't either. Alright, although Russ has the locations in Tennessee and Alabama opened, as I mentioned before, his San Diego operation, the very first one he opened, has been closed. While looking into why, I'd hoped to hear that San Diego had banned him for reasons that other states may be willing to implement later. Unfortunately, according to the news source KPBS, the only reason McKamey dismantled the manor is because he lost his job as a veterans advocate and needed to downsize, San Diego of course being far too expensive. This is most likely how he affords to run the other locations, because he sold an expensive San Diego home and he does receive an $800 a month pension. There are those that speculate that McKamey may also garner money from gambling, as he's claimed to guests that he's live-streamed these events to a group in Las Vegas that bets on how long participants will last and provide McKamey with a cut of the winnings. I wouldn't be surprised if this were occurring, but though this theory is fairly widespread on the internet, I can't really confirm or deny it. There's just no genuine proof. Although, if there were any genuine proof out there, the Hostel movies would have some serious competition. As a brief aside in regards to the first manor, there was a $250,000 tax lien on his home, according to the San Diego Tribune, but McKamey did resolve this with the IRS and was eventually able to move. On the way to discovering a new town to terrorize, McKamey originally debated moving to Illinois, the small town of McLeansboro, 2 hours from St. Louis, Illinois, or St. Louis, Illinois. They weren't having any of this, according to the Riverfront Times. It only took a few weeks for controversy to erupt around McKamey's plans to McLeansboro. As soon as we got there on July 10th, it started getting ugly. All hell broke loose, McKamey says. So much hate and venom. They were throwing bricks through the window, shooting the window out, and praying in front of the building. The building that McKamey planned to relocate to was a warehouse owned by Patricia Irvin, who offered to lease the property to the horror impresario, but she now says that she made the agreement without ever having watched videos of McKamey's work. "I wanted a family haunt," Irvin says. Okay, now first of all, I don't know why Russ acts surprised that all hell broke loose. He runs a torture house. I don't condone vandalism at all, but at the same time, I truly can't blame the residents in this area for trying to do everything that they can to get Russ to leave. If he insists on running these sadistic events and can't be arrested for it, neighbors and residents of the area are naturally going to be upset by seeing people harmed. After all, when Russ eventually moved to Tennessee, witnesses saw a woman dragged from a vehicle screaming and seemingly forced into Russ's home. She was there consensually. The cops witnesses called were sent away. But even witnessing a kidnapping may be traumatizing, especially if a kid were to see that. I have to wonder if someone who witnesses these events as a passerby could sue Russ for emotional distress. It's not as if they know it's fake, but back to what Illinois thought of McKamey Manor. According to the Riverfront Times, still, even after watching the grisly spectacles featured on the McKamey Manor YouTube channel, Irvin says she wanted to honor the deal she'd made with McKamey. But opposition to the venture sprouted almost immediately. Commenters on the local news coverage voiced concern that a known psychopath was about to open up a torture house in their quaint little town. Facebook groups were created to marshal further support for keeping McKamey Manor out of McLeansboro. Then, the vandalism started. Irvin says someone shot out windows and slashed the tires on her car. The building also attracted protesters and public prayer demonstrations. We were getting multiple threats, things like, "We're going to burn down the building," she says. By early August, McKamey and Irvin decided to pull the plug. Interviews with both parties indicate that other factors were at play in addition to the local opposition. Irvin says that McKamey made little effort to build relationships with the town's residents and leaders, and she claims he failed to install a sprinkler system after the fire marshal's inspection. Ultimately, she blames McKamey for abandoning the project and leaving his partners in the lurch. McKamey has his own axe to grind. He says that he left $35,000 worth of equipment in Irvin's building, including high-end speakers and props. Irvin declined to comment on the status of McKamey's equipment. So, what does the future hold for McKamey Manor? Whatever it is, it won't be happening near St. Louis or St. Louis. This is about when McKamey moved to Tennessee and eventually Alabama, and both locations seem to continue to be in use to this day. Again, though all this prize money has been debated, it seems as if the Tennessee location opened first and doesn't offer a reward. But when McKamey opened up the Alabama location in 2019, which holds the newest Desolation experience, this is more mental than physical, he offered the $20,000 prize money. That seems to be why the Nashville scene claims there's no reward money, but other sources say there is. It's for Desolation only. McKamey has been all the more secretive about the Desolation location, which again, considering what I witnessed in the red and black gory and disturbing trailer, is worrying. The Nashville scene has also said that Summertown, about 70 miles south of Nashville in a part of Lawrence County, hasn't exactly given McKamey a warm welcome either. Lawrence County officials continue to get complaints. Petitions pop up, and not everyone who survives the manor leaves happy. Or at least feeling as if they were a willing participant anyway. Some say they were held captive long after they said any kind of safe phrase, which would be illegal, as the district attorney said earlier. It seems if proof of this does come out, Russ could be arrested for not respecting someone's right to withdraw consent. Since no proof is available of this though, I'm not sure when or if this will ever occur. But again, the scene of a woman being kidnapped wasn't the only time the public has had to suffer through McKamey's events. According to my source, Lawrence County District Attorney Brent Cooper says his office received dozens of complaints about McKamey in the manor's first few months, and cops rushing to the property in response to a possible hostage situation. Well, it wasn't a great way to meet the neighbors. According to Mr. McKamey, they had the woman down in the storm shelter, and she was down there consensually, but the deputies did not know that, Cooper tells the scene. The way he described the scene to us, if the deputies had gone down there to see what he had done to this woman, the deputies would have shot Mr. McKamey. Thankfully, the day didn't end in tragedy. The battery died on McKamey's camera. He films everything, and when he left the storm shelter to grab another, he encountered the officers and explained the situation. The woman confirmed she was a voluntary participant in the show. It really freaked him out, says Cooper. Before the deputies found Mr. McKamey, they found a lot of props in the barn, and some of those are pretty gory looking. They were really freaked out by what kind of activities were going on at this place. Russ obviously doesn't care what others think of him. Fine, but at the very least he should keep this private so that the public doesn't have to witness these disturbing acts. If not for the public then, maybe for himself. If a cop shot him for kidnapping or harming someone, it would be no one's fault but his own. It's not as if a stranger or a new neighbor would assume that. Oh, these screaming abuse victims have consented to being harmed. Yeah, right. That is beyond wishful freaking thinking. As genuinely stomach-churning as all this is, we still have more to talk about. After all, we still have to go over what people are saying behind the scenes. There have have been some disturbing things said over the years about McKamey Manor, obviously, but there's been some equally upsetting allegations about Russ McKamey himself. One of his ex-girlfriends has said in a now unavailable video that Russ is sexually interested in children. YouTuber Ready to Glare made a video about this topic, which is how I found some of that footage. Posts claim that his ex has now retracted her statement, but still claims he abused her. Women on Facebook groups about his manor would claim that the volunteers of these events were ex-cons, sex offenders, and that one volunteer had an erection while running people through. Now again, all of this is alleged. It's been posted on forums, but no reliable sources have confirmed or denied it. The Guardian shows video evidence of Russ watching and re-watching the torture he inflicts upon others, so Russ himself clearly gets some enjoyment out of seeing people go through hell, which is disturbing enough. Maybe I have a weak stomach, but just 1 minute of that grainy, poor quality trailer for Desolation, and I needed to step back from my computer. I can't imagine someone watching and compiling hours and hours of footage like that, let alone enjoying it. Again, on the note of talking about what happens behind the scenes, YouTuber D'Angelo Wallace was able to get into the McKamey Manor's secret Facebook group. He explains that there's a strange dynamic between Russ and the group members, that it comes across as a Russ McKamey fan club, and that the energy of the members is off. D'Angelo says that one member even posted a photo of her child waterboarding a teddy bear, and how Russ would require members to complete a star challenge to get a tour of one of his locations. Now, some of these star challenges seem surprisingly innocent, like asking trivia questions, and every time a participant gets a question wrong, they'd be sprayed in the face with a hose. Another star challenge was just plain strange, demanding that someone go to the grocery store and act like a safari tour guide, narrating the items as if they were wild animals. Every single star challenge, D'Angelo explains, has a theme of humiliation. This power dynamic adds an entirely new level. Not only are these guests allowing themselves to be tortured for the potential to gain money, but to meet someone they admire and see as some sort of a celebrity. Thankfully, the power he holds does seem to be diminishing more and more over the years. Star challenges have been watered down. Russ claims he's lost his edge. Moderators of the Facebook group have gotten more paranoid since the public began bringing awareness to this topic, and the mods are more desperately pressuring and insisting people to participate and go on the tours. Regardless of whether or not Russ has lost his edge, or if all the bad press has had any sort of effect on the manor, the place is very clearly the product of sadism and perhaps masochism. Just because something is technically legal doesn't mean that it should be condoned or celebrated. I mean, after all, things like slavery were legal. Are they morally right? I've tried to keep my personal opinion out of this video as much as I'm able to, but yeah, exaggerated or not, Russ's shows have gone on long enough. I truly hope they die out, and I don't ever think I'd want to meet a man that gets this much pleasure in other people's torment. In conclusion, with all that being said, that's where I'm gonna end today's video. Don't worry, you are released from my torture. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. If you wanna see more from me, make sure to check out my links in the description below. And hey, if you really enjoyed today's video, you better get yourself subscribed because there is a lot coming down the pipeline. Alright guys, see you later!